And we are live. Hello, it's Thursday the 15th of October. It's approximately 9:30 p.m. on the island of Ireland, and you're watching Broadsheet on the telly because you've nothing better to do. Joining me, as always, on the panel tonight, the man on the north side, the man who puts the north in the north side. That makes no sense. No. The master Malahide. How's it going, Jimmy?
It's going very, 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 very well. We're going to talk about the budget in a minute, but no, it's not going well. I'm actually got a touch of the COVID anxiety depression thing. And this week has given me it's a bit of an existential dip.
Well,
I don't feel positive. I feel toxically positive if that's the case. You know what I mean?
I'm not here to provide therapy, Jimmy, but I will say that your lighting setup is some of the best, some of the most artistic we have seen.
See, I'm just a creator in everything I do. I just get out of bed and start creating.
This is Jimmy's mood life. He's going like a mood ring light.
Do you know what it is? That's like the old Chivagos.
Chivagos, where the gang? No, there was Tamangos.
Love stories, big ass.
That's what that was there. It was Tamangos where the gang goes. Chivagos were a love story. I was never allowed into Chivagos. Once or twice I got in. I was always too scruffy. Stopped. Not tonight, bud. You know.
What about rumors? What about rumors on O'Connell Street?
Rumors.
No, that would have been for boggers now. Sorry, Derek. That was, and even though I'm a bogger, I never let on I was when I was in Dublin. You know?
Well, from the creator of the light creator, fantastic, to the mistress of darkness, celebrity accountant. You can even see the darkness as it comes out from behind her there. Vanessa Foran.
I'm playing. Hi, everybody. I'm playing with a new green screen, so I'll take suggestions and advice tips.
What does it say, Vanessa? What does it say?
Well, I'm just about to say so. It is today is World Credit Union Day. Oh. And so it's supposed to say inspiring the world, but it clearly doesn't. This is the inspiring hope across the globe. Cool. So everywhere there's credit unions today, they do. It's like a fixture in the calendar and has been for over 70 years. It's World Credit Union Day, and there is what do I hear is 3.9 billion. No, sorry, 290 billion members of credit unions on the planet, and 3.4 million members on the island of Ireland. And we've only just got a junior minister.
Wow.
That's just one part of the cooperative movement.
That is some of the best news I've heard all day. I don't know about the rest of it, but that is definitely so. I'm actually going to pause the show and message me mammy and let her know that today's
it's World Credit Union Day.
Credit unions are there. You should, not just for mammies. I mean,
this is true. Yeah. Sure. Where you wouldn't? The Undertones' first record was a loan from the Derry Credit Union.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
That is correct.
From the credit union to the discredit union. Unfortunately, Derek couldn't be with us tonight, but he has sent a sub. Is in his teenage brother. Welcome to the show, brother.
He looks like his name should be Trevor.
Yeah, Trevor O'Donoghue.
My brother's name is Trevor. I have a brother called Trevor. There you go,
Trevor.
I was feeling very confident coming on tonight with my new haircut, and then Neil just burst my bubble before we started, taking the absolute Mickey out of it. So, but I'm here, lighter, and raring to go.
Well, it's fair to say, Derek, that you're definitely, your wife had a great deal of involvement in that haircut, which is why you're probably streaming from outdoors so that she can't hear our comments.
That's your garden, Derek. The trees, big mature trees.
It's a backyard rather than a garden.
Okay.
We live in a condo, with a townhouse, a 3-bedroom townhouse, but we have a very small back garden. It's just a yard, but it's a nice complex, and it has swimming pools and stuff like that, but they're not open because of COVID. But this backyard space feels very small. It was perfectly fine for the first 3 years, but this year you really miss having your back garden when we don't have access to the other stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Poor me.
Yeah, but then you have to look after it, so sometimes it's not as...
But you got the sunshine, man. That's one thing. It looks like
yeah.
There is a GoFundMe set up for Derek in his back garden.
There's no ash falling today, so that's another plus as well.
That's good. We're very pleased. Pleased.
Well, we did actually, our county, Santa Clara County, have moved into tier three of the lockdown program. So the worst tier is purple. The next tier after that is red, and then we are moving into the orange tier, which allows things to open up more. What it means is basically to move into the orange tier, we had to have less than 5 cases per 100,000 for 3 weeks in a row. So we're below 5 cases per 100,000. If we need to get to the next stage, to get to the yellow stage, we need to be below 1 case per 100,000 for 3 weeks in a row. But it's good news. Inside dining is opening up for
Derek, shut up, would you? Because
25% capacity.
It's after getting worse here, and you're pissing me off now.
Well, I'm not trying to piss you off, but I tell you what. Between your weather, I think you have to ask questions about schools. Like I think it's our kids are on distance learning. They can go back now in this stage officially, but they're not going to go back till January. To me, like, what's the big difference between what we're doing here and what's happening at home? I could bring into Las Gatas now to have lunch like we did a couple of weeks ago, and you'd be able to see very busy restaurants, outside dining. There's lots of things happening. You can go get your hair cut like I did, all that sort of stuff. But the big difference from what I can see is the schools, it's distance learning. Kids aren't going to school. And to me, I don't understand. I can't get my head around the idea that people can say kids going to schools aren't transmitting the virus.
It's crazy. It's some sort of mantra here. It's crazy at the moment.
Like what doesn't add up. And I know that they're saying that all the evidence shows that kids aren't transmitting it. Well, I need to see that evidence because my logic tells me differently.
I agree, and it's some kind of mantra here where the idea of closing the schools is just anathema. You know what I mean? And I get that in a lot of ways, but where we are, I don't know how up on this you are, Derek, at the moment. But today we 1,200 cases today, right? 1,200 new infections and 3 deaths. I think so. That's the highest daily. Now I know there's lots of mitigating reasons, a lot more testing and stuff, but it's critical. It's very critical here. It appears now. And I would have thought, okay, we're heading towards that 5-phase plan that Fine Gael drew up. They're arsing around with that. We're at 3.2.6 now or something with kind of bits of 4 and all that stuff. Why don't they make it? I feel like they should either commit and make a brave move and go to level 4 or level 5. Whatever
they are ticking around with it there. And just on the 9 o'clock news there, Tony Hoolan was nearly giving himself a stroke.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's gone mad altogether. It's gone.
But he has been proven right. I mean, he did say this, and he
but what they're done now is that the border counties they're pushing into state 4. But when they were saying this, it reminded me of what we were talking about last week, but this opening and closing. Trying to get a gig, getting a gig, and then it's stopping it, or Neil organising a class or a show and then having to stop it. And it's the not knowing. And that makes the recovery even harder than having this constant stopping. And I definitely got a sense of that listening to the sort of the on-street reporters talking to some people in Monaghan. This on and off. Maybe they just have to pull the plaster.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think so. I mean, why have that 5-phase plan? And
it's just, there's just this admission of failure, I think, is what the reluctance of them is, because, they're still no better at managing it than they were in March.
Again, Vanessa, it's just the playing of politics. I saw, I haven't seen Donnelly say anything about this. I did see Simon Harris talking about it, oddly enough.
I know.
Have we 2 minutes? Have we 2 minutes for health now? Have we?
Oh yeah, but he's taking Donnelly's questions.
What is that? That's bizarre. Is that politicking? Is that some sort of undermining move against Fianna Fáil? What is going on there? It's just when the world is burning around them, they're playing fucking politics.
Well, it does look like Fine Gael are kind of running the show, the way
I know
Simon
Neil
Harris
Martin.
is taking Donnelly's questions.
And
Leo is going on like he's the Taoiseach.
Micheál Martin's in Brussels today, and that's obviously a Brexit thing, and that seems awfully inconsequential at this moment in time. You know what I mean?
But I think because we've got a few
Yeah,
topics.
but that's the
on
problem, though.
We have a few topics on the
It's
go
not.
there, but I let me just get back to education for a moment, if we can, because Derek, we've actually been speaking, offline. Oh, did you see what I did there? Brought work talking to a broadsheet show. We've been talking over the summer about schools, and some studies are showing kids aren't a big spreader, and other studies are showing they are. Some studies are showing schools aren't a problem, other studies they are. But I think what gets lost in a lot of these things, because Spain is nearly very familiar with, Spain have published early data which shows schools aren't an issue whatsoever with the virus. However, when you drill into the details of that, and I have mentioned this on this show before, they hired the region I'm most familiar with, the Valencia region, population 5.1 million, so comparable with Ireland. They hired an additional 4,000 teachers. So average class sizes were brought down from 26 to 12. So I think it's fair to say that makes it a little bit easier to have social distancing and manage the numbers. So that nicely leads into schools aren't a problem. We have cases, I'm hearing anecdotally stories about schools here that entered in the papers from people who have kids in the schools. And of course, you have the US experience. So, the elephant in the room with whether schools are a problem or not has to be class size.
Okay. I'll come back to something in a second, but just, I see in Ireland that they've said no home visits, right? So that includes like no play dates, for example, right? So you can't go visit your cousins, or you can't go visit your granny, but you can go and pack into a classroom with 24, 26, 30 kids, 32 kids, whatever it is, right? And yet somehow, because they're in a school building, that they're isolated from, they're insulated from spreading the virus. It's like the magic barrier around them that's going to stop the virus spreading. It just logically, it doesn't make sense. Like, how can you have a policy where you can't go to a house, but it's okay to go to pack into school? Just from hearing people's experience at home, just talking to various different people, there's cases in schools. There people who somebody gets a case in the school. There's no contact tracing going on. For some reason, if you get COVID in the school, the people in the class around you aren't deemed to be close contacts for whatever reason. Again, just makes no logic. There's nobody being informed of tests from what people are telling me. So it seems to me that there is this desire to keep the schools open at all costs, and I understand that, because I have a 10-year-old here who wants to be back in school with her friends, and I understand people have parents of jobs and stuff. What I don't understand is the logic and how they can say transmission is not an issue. When look at the figures, look at the number of kids who had COVID before schools went back, look at the number of kids who have COVID now. You can see that there's been an increase 4 or 5 times. In our case over here, our big spike in cases was in July and August. Since August, our cases have been going down, so much so that we're now able to enter into the next phase. What's the difference? In Ireland, it's nearly the opposite way around. The difference is we have distance learning. Now, so when I'm asking myself the logic of what's different between teenagers being in a classroom or kids being in a classroom and kids being in grannies, how come like they can do one, they can't do the other? And then I look at the figures I'm seeing here, where for me the biggest difference between what we were doing in Santa Clara and what the measures were in Ireland was the schools. Like the Santa Clara like opened up a little bit, as I've been saying over the last few weeks. There's things you can do. I'd say I got the haircut, going dine outside, all that sort of stuff. But the big difference to me in terms of their policies was the schools. I do think as well, we've been very compliant with mask wearing and social distancing over here from the get-go. People just accepted the wearing the masks. and sorry, the air conditioners have kicked in. Is that very loud?
No.
So that's I get why schools need to be open. I 100% get why everybody wants that. Teachers I've spoken to, they want to be in school. Students definitely want to be in school. Parents want their kids to be in school. But it just doesn't make any sense to me that how they can say it's not a factor in the increase in cases.
So where's the measurement of failure here? That's something I'm wondering, because there's an adamancy to have the schools open even in level 5. So schools don't close, full stop. Is that a measure of failure then? If is that, other jurisdictions, other countries, have points where they close schools. We've seen Northern Ireland are closing schools. What is it about the Republic of Ireland that we have this aversion to closing the schools? And is that a measure of our failure?
I think probably a lot of public pressure onto TDs to say we need to have schools open. Yeah. I'm sure there's lots of parents ringing in on the phone. You need to get schools open. I think a lot of public pressure possibly.
But it's the childcare. It's the childcare thing. There's a huge problem with childcare anyway. Even before this, to be fair, that minister did nothing for it either. It was Catherine Sapone, who was I won't even. Jimmy'll have a proper word for her, but she there was a childcare issue here, and there was far too much. Not in a bad way, by the way, but it was more out of necessity. Far too much childcare being provided by older people, by an older person in the house. It might have been a granny or something like that. And then when lockdown happened and people were cocooning, that stopped. And then the creches stopped. And then there was a huge lag between getting the creches open, even for essential workers. And Sapone completely lost it altogether. I mean, if people had doubts about her up to then, there was no shadow of doubt during her acting phase. So it's principally childcare, I think, because we don't have that net here.
Yeah,
I
do think people it's not kids need to socialize. You're only 10 once, right? And you miss out on the school play, and you miss out on the playground interaction, and you miss out on the football games. Apart from the learning, just the social interaction, people crave that for their kids. We're missing it here hugely. But as even though the county we're at this level that we're at, we're allowed to go back to school, but the school have decided to stay out until January at least. Just cautious. And as I said, the caseload has been. I know I annoyed you when I said it, Vanessa, but I'm just saying what the facts are. The cases per 100,000 is 5. It's below 5 to be able to go into this orange tier.
Yeah.
And
I know you didn't annoy me. It was the opening up of everything. You've got it organised and we're going backwards.
We're going backwards, yeah, exactly.
That's the problem. I wasn't annoyed at you doing so well. It was that we're actually going backwards here, and we're going into the winter.
Yeah.
It's grim. It's so grim.
And I sent you guys a message there about the hospital in Cork.
That's Portlaoise as well. 2 hospitals.
But the thing is, the HSE in the last 10 years have made what I know as Cork Regional Hospital is now Cork University Hospital. That is the sort of trauma centre in the south. Serious traumas in Kerry or Limerick, or whatever, they would chop her in to this hospital, and they've no ICU beds. That's. I don't know.
Vanessa, you made a point last week. I have to say, or maybe it's 2 weeks ago, whatever. But you made this point very strongly, and you're dead right. What have we done since March to improve the healthcare facilities and to improve capacity? You're very strong on how we haven't improved that.
It's not even that. It's not even that we haven't enhanced our healthcare setup, right? We haven't. Well, 16 ICU beds, that's what we have. And a load of temporary people to do the testing. That's what we have. What I think our biggest failure is that we actually still haven't come up with a plan on how we live with this, how we can live and function with this. It is still their answer to everything is a lockdown. That is not the way to function, and even the budget hinted at that. Do you know what I mean?
And how does a lockdown? How does keeping schools open fit in with a lockdown? Because like,
see, I think it's a fear thing. I think it's a fear thing. Like, it's a bit like, that's like, you know, in America they have the expression the third rail. Touching Social Security in America, they call it touching, you know, in politics is third rail. They call it that because that's the rail in the subway that carries the charge, and you know, and they just don't touch it. And it, I suppose you could say social welfare here, well, PRSI is like that because they won't touch it. Okay, although he did tinker with it in the budget, but do you know, it's teaching here. I don't know whether it's the unions or whether there's just some historic relationship, because it was the teachers' pension. They cashed in their pension in the 30s and gave it to De Valera, and that's what got that government through. They effectively kind of, they're minded for life, I suppose. I don't know. I maybe it's that relationship with the unions are very powerful. The teaching unions are very powerful.
Most overstated
hard
thing
to know.
That's the most overstated thing in Ireland, and it's completely untrue. The unions.
So hold on. We've had 3 successive teachers that have been ex-teachers. Come on.
they got out of teaching.
Well, they did.
They didn't give up their jobs. Hang on a second. No, Derek.
He never retired. Yeah.
They never gave up their jobs, so you don't get to
years
say
out
that.
Of teaching, and he did, yeah.
You don't get to say that. They didn't give up their posts. Mary Hannafin didn't give up her post.
I think if you go into any staff room and ask people what they think of the teaching unions, they think of them in a very bad light. They think that ever since going back to...
I know, Derek. Sorry, Derek. I'm going to stop you there. You hear that today. You hear that, but you wouldn't have heard it 10 years ago. You hear that today because the unions threw newcomers into the game in the toilet. And Debenhams this week, the Debenham workers this week were there facing an injunction to have them thrown out of the sit-in. That would never have happened 20 years ago. Every retail worker would have been out in sympathy with them.
Yeah.
There was no trade unions representatives down there. On Post, Dublin Bus, Air Rienta, Irish Rail, they've all been out in strike. They didn't come out in support of these workers.
This is my point. This is exactly my point about the weakness of the trade union movement. That's what I'm saying. You began by saying the teachers' unions are so strong. My exact point is what you're saying. They're not. It's a myth that the teachers' unions are strong. The teachers' unions have rolled over time and time again. The ASTI have tried to put up a fight on numerous occasions. The ASTI are the most vilified union in Ireland because they have tried on occasion to fight alone for teachers and for workers. And because they've tried to fight alone, they are absolutely vilified across the board. You think?
But I don't think that's the problem. I think.
No, hang on a second. You see, you can't tell me that the teachers' unions are really strong, and then say the union movement isn't fighting.
Hang on,
one union that did try to fight,
what they're terrified
the one union that did try to fight gets, what were they called? Look at all the headlines that they've got. The nasty union. The
but that's up to the trade union movement.
No, that's
not what we're talking about.
Hang on a second. You began by saying the trade union movement, the teachers' unions have this big hold, or a really powerful union. I'm telling you, they're not. They've let their members down so badly. Newcomers and all members, pensioners and everything, right? The ASTI was the only union that tried to stand up at since the economic crash. Going back to benchmarking. The ASTI rejected benchmarking. Remember that. The ASTI turned down benchmarking, and they were vilified for it. Look, I'm out of it. I haven't been in union for 5 years. I'm living over here, but let's get the facts right. They're vilified in the media, Irish Times, Irish Independent in particular, vilified in RTE, and they're called names. And other trade unions, SIP2 in particular, Impact, never backed them. And never mind other teachers' unions. The INTO are always in the government's pocket, and the TUI always pretend to support and then back away. But you're right in that the trade union movement as a whole should be backing the Debenhams workers. They should be like supporting them 100%. But the union movement haven't. The union movement is weak in Ireland. Very weak.
Well, it sold itself out. But that wasn't the point I was making. They are terrified of the teachers coming out on strike. They're terrified of the teachers saying, no, it's too unsafe for our members. This wasn't a talk about the unions having power. It was as a group, as a collective group. The government and successive governments are terrified of the teachers going out on strike. Because that's where they get hit with their constituents. Because it's cheap childcare. That's what it is. And that's why this time they'll be the last to be pulled. And listen, if they were all that, they would have managed to get the Leaving Cert done. The biggest mistake during this whole thing was not running the Leaving Cert.
That was a disaster, yeah.
Vanessa, I wanted to talk to you about the budget, because we had a very strange budget this year.
We did, yeah. Well, I tell you what, one of the things that was very strange about it, there wasn't that much chatter about it. You know, like I personally now would have always sat down and watched every word of it and followed up, and I would have got the speaking notes from the different parties, and you know, the budget breakfasts that go on around the place, and it was just also low key. But one thing I did notice, and I posted it today, it was more of a prospectus than a budget, and it was very business. And they made it look, one of my notes here was actually, they made it look all about health, and they made it look as if it was all about housing, and they made it look as if they were all dealing with climate change. And actually they weren't, because the health is just what they already announced in July. And the housing was the extension to the Help to Buy scheme. That was already extended in July. Now they're just extending it out again. So, and like they were talking about the numbers. It's the biggest budget in the history of the state, 17.5 billion, but only 280 million of that was actually taxes coming back. Do you know what I mean? So it was very much more like a prospectus. There were some interesting things in it there now with the gaming. I thought that was a bit, that sounds like it actually came from a lobbyist. It didn't sound like it. There was a movement behind this, the relief for game development. That sounded like it was it came from a lobby, you know. But maybe it is something, I don't know. The other thing about it is that they made it. They said it was like the worst case scenario for Brexit as well. But it was a very unusual budget, most definitely. I'm 150 quid a year better off anyway. But then again, I'm 2 cents a litre out of pocket for diesel.
Normally we'd ask you, was there any surprises in the budget?
The gaming thing, that was quite surprised. That was quite unique because it was so specific. So it would be interesting now to see, does that attract that type of industry to Ireland? Or it's a great opportunity, by the way, because the R&D thing is actually what all the pharma companies get as well. And you know, the way they kept corporation tax the same, 12.5, that kind of suggests that they think it's going to be the same. That the take so far this year hasn't dropped. They were expecting that, but one of the main tax people in the country, actually, he's a partner in one of the big firms. And I saw a message from him on LinkedIn, and his view was that the economic cost of COVID is hasn't really hit yet. We're about 6 months to a year away from that. So the populist thing this time around was dropping the VAT back down to 9% for tourism and leisure. So I have a problem with that on the basis that I can go and get a luxury spa weekend in the Brook Lodge and only pay 9%, Whereas I have people who are insolvent, they're bankrupt, they come to me and I have to collect VAT off them now at the moment at 21%. So that doesn't make sense, you know. But it was it a good one? It wasn't even exciting, actually. There was no fun in it. There was no, it wasn't. It was, as I say, it was more of a prospectus than a budget.
What about the Nessa Horgan from the Greens was asking about money going to landlords, to the private, what was it?
HAP.
Yeah, the HAP scheme. And any thoughts around that, Vanessa?
Well, I actually wrote about this one before, and it was actually, he's now Minister for Credit Union, Sean Fleming. And I remember he was telling me, I was at an event, and he was telling me that the HAP today, so this would have been budget 2019 probably, or maybe 2018. And I remember him telling me that the HAP initiative has actually not delivered one extra rental unit. Like, it hasn't brought in another 1,000 rental units on top of what was already there. I think HAP is actually a cop-out, because what HAP is doing is it's actually hiding the fact that your social housing is being provided by the private sector. Whereas we need to take ownership of that back. We need to get that stock into local authority ownership, or cooperative housing schemes ownership, or the voluntary housing schemes. That needs to come back. HAP makes it look like it's money for social housing and it's money to get people out of hotel rooms and into houses, when that's dressing. What it actually is it's privatizing social housing. So I think once more people see it that way, you'll have more of a push on for the local authorities to actually stop spending HAP money and using it to build. And then we own that stock. When I say we, I mean the royal we, viewer.
Yeah.
And I think cooperatives, I think there's two things I've thought about, sorry, Neil, for a couple of years on this now. And I still don't get why nobody's come up with a good plan about long-term renting. Like in Germany, people would rent long-term, or in the States. Nobody here has ever come up and made long-term renting a good idea, or even an option for a family, long-term renting, other than unless they are in social housing and they get a tenancy, a local authority tenancy. The other thing about is cooperative schemes. I'm really disappointed there isn't enough looked into that, or provided, or pushed into cooperative schemes, because I do think cooperative housing schemes are probably the way to get housing built in cities. Anyway, that's enough.
There was another budget thing I wanted to ask you about, Vanessa, because I know you're a big fan of the organization known as RTE.
Oh yeah.
So they.
Sorry guys, can I just? I have to take off my T-shirt. I melted.
Okay,
I have to take God off.
Hang on, this is a family-friendly show, Vanessa.
I got a shirt on underneath.
The watershed.
Look away.
Sorry,
hurt your eyes,
John, God, Fenton. Sorry, I have to take the T-shirt off.
We said no. We said no political shirts on the show.
Okay, no. Oh yeah, but this is a religion. This is John Fenton.
Even worse, no religion allowed on the show either. So RTE, they are the orchestras, the two orchestras that RTE fund.
Just be clear on that, Neil. They've already separate. The symphony orchestra are no longer part of RTE, right?
Yes.
That division was made about a year ago.
Okay.
Last review. So the concert orchestra have got nothing. The symphony orchestra get the 8 million.
Yes. So 8 million is transferring the symphony orchestra to the National Concert Hall.
Which is really bizarre, because that is actually their home. That's where that place was. They had made a deal. This is where I don't understand why that money. You're asking Vanessa this, but I'll just jump in.
Yes, yeah.
You're the musician.
Well, I do work with them, and it's interesting because they've had this after the last review. The compromise was that the RT will hold on to the concert orchestra and the chamber orchestra, which is paid for out of something like 5% of the license fee pays for all these performing groups. Now it's very easy, and let me just put my working class bona fides out here. I'm not a classical music snob or anything. It's not that, but I would defend these guys. So I was very involved in that that because RT were pretty much at one point trying to offload the whole deal, just get rid of everything. Like for instance, the Late Late Show. If you look at it the other night, I watched it the other night, and it's awful. And the first thing they did was get rid of the band, right? Which was Paddy Cullivan, and it's like the one time when you need something, because Ryan Tuberty is pretty lame on his own. If he had some interaction with someone, a clever mind like Paddy Cullivan, you would have the one time you need. There's no audience; it's just dead space, So the first thing to do is get. So that's kind of a typical thing with RT. Anyway, so they had made this arrangement that they were no longer going to be financing the symphony orchestra, and they were going to be under the aegis of the concert hall, the NCH. So they're in the process of moving there. The place is shut down for a year now because they're doing renovations and stuff. So I don't understand why that $8 million is given to them. It's probably to keep them floating, but if that should have gone anywhere, it should have gone between the working bands, as the concert orchestra and the chamber orchestra in Limerick. That's where that should have gone. The symphony orchestra are actually okay. They'll probably tell you otherwise, but they can't. They clearly can't play, obviously. But there's probably enough funds to keep them there for a while. I think they're all living on borrowed time, unless I don't know what might happen.
Well, I suppose you have to accept that they're living on borrowed time. But Neil, it's interesting that you brought up about the orchestra, because the first article I wrote as Vanessa for Broadsheet was the RT accounts, and there was it opened up about the orchestra, about how much it was costing, and John took it out. I think he thought it was being mean to them. So that would have been 3 or 4 years ago, I think, and it came back to haunt them last year in their it would have been their then 2018 accounts. And that's when the decision was made to send it over. I never saw, I suppose I have to kind of be the sort of the finance head here. And I never saw the orchestras, given the cost to the bottom line in RT, never saw it as their core activity. So it should have gone out or severed or made redundant long before now. Is there a role for them in the National Concert Hall? I have no idea. I don't know how that works. I don't know whether they already have an in-house orchestra.
They are the in-house orchestra of the concert hall, right?
Okay, so well then, why were they out there? Like that sounds very sort of by committee kind of thing again.
Well, it is a little bit, but it's also it's like a cultural thing. How do you define a great city? You define it. You go to Madrid, you go to the Prada. You define it by its museums and its orchestras and stuff. And we had this discussion 2 years ago, Vanessa, very much. And you remember that. In fairness to Michael D, and that was an interesting thing actually, because I was working with the concert orchestra at that time, and we were out to do a thing out in the Ars Neutron, and he took me aside because a little known fact, ladies and gentlemen, Michael D. Higgins used to be my agent about 30 years ago.
Oh,
I let you that simmer for a minute. Him and Louis Walsh were partners, right? Business partners. Anyway, yeah. So he took me aside and he says, "Are you working with the band this week?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Will you go in and tell them that I'm 100% behind them?" And I says, "Why don't you do it? You're the ex-minister for arts, and you're the president." He says, "I can't." I said, "Oh, really? You can't?" He says, "It's complicated. It's because of my Labour past and because I was the minister of art." So there's the president, that is before the presidential election, all that stuff, telling me that he's hamstrung by his political past.
I think he said that a few times, though, hasn't he? From the Irish, that he's quite hamstrung.
I've never heard him say it publicly. He did it to me that anyway. So that was a kind of a peripheral story.
Well,
so I went in and told them they were, but they were. So I was defending them, and RT were trying to let them go. Now, however, the argument is always that, well, they should. The concert orchestra, for instance, which is more tied to RT, the symphony orchestra have all been floating somewhere else. They have a whole database of kind of philanthropy.
But RTE have an orchestra, isn't it?
That's the
concert orchestra.
Yes, that's their band, right?
Their band, okay.
So they're bands. They're just calling bands. They're orchestras, but they're bands, big bands, right? And they have different remits. The concert orchestra is a much more popular program. The symphony orchestra is it's a bigger band for starters, and it plays the classic repertoire, right? So it's more complex. So whether you go, the other thing is people should be going to the concert hall because it's a very inexpensive night out for most people. It's not for everybody. And I didn't go and see an orchestra till I was well in my 30s. Like I thought it was for posh people and Protestants. You know what I mean? But yeah, seriously, because that's all, orchestra. But I got involved. I started working with them, and I realized, oh no, it's not. It's for everybody. But where am I going with this? So RTE they've been pretty much making these bands survive on 5% of the license fee, right? It used to be 9%. That's for all the performing groups. That groups they're smaller. So like these bands, so they're supposed to. So the concert orchestra, for instance, they started going more and more populist. They would be doing stuff like
the
ABBA,
proms, kind of the Irish
the
proms.
Bee Gees and things like that, but much more really pop and rock things. And I did some fantastic things with them with Deep Purple, with John Lord from Deep Purple and John Scott. These amazing guys and very advanced. Like 3 nights in the concert hall, totally sold out. So they were actually making money. They were kind of making not enough money to survive, but certainly putting money back in the pot and justifying their existence a lot. The symphony orchestra, on the other hand, they'd be harder to do that. They're not a very popular thing, so they do need to be propped up, and I agree with them being propped up. I think the state should pay for the National Gallery and pay.
I think if it's 8 million a year, I would say that's good value for money. If it was just the 8 million a year,
I don't have the figures.
I doubt keeping that size of a payroll.
You're looking at 60 musicians, and
I've actually been to the concert hall, and the teenager has performed in the concert hall, and I've been backstage, and it's a very big thing, like shipping an orchestra here, on tour, like it's not like the guitar on the back of the the boot of the car. It's a major event, yeah. And the instruments,
aural orgasm is what it is. It's a fantastic thing, and people should go and when I was teaching, I used to get all my students to music and most kids in college had never been to see an orchestra. Music students, and I would tell you this is an exercise in dynamics and absolutely, like, these players are so good. It's so competitive to get, and the average wage of a rank and file second violinist in the orchestra is the same as a bus driver. Right?
Do you know what? I think I'd prefer to sit as the second violin in an orchestra than drive a Dublin bus.
There you go. But think about it: 6 weeks training gets you into Dublin bus. To be second violin takes about 25 years of intense.
Well, that's true. Okay, all right. So I didn't mean to mock. I know what it takes. Okay. I wouldn't hear that.
Nothing wrong with bus drivers. I'm looking for a job myself. Is there any opening? I'm kidding, but
I think the question that probably most people have, Jimmy and Vanessa, is: does this mean I'll see a reduction in my TV license fee?
No.
Can I
think it's going to go up. I think the license fee is going to go up, and I have to say this. RTE, we're now into October, the 10th month of the year. We still haven't seen RTE's accounts for 2019, and we haven't seen the FAIs either for 2019. And the Johnny Keenan late of the show was kicking off about the Grab All Association and asking questions. And I went to look at their accounts again. And their 2019 accounts, now their year ends in October.
Is the FAI?
The soccer, the GA's year end ends in October. Okay. Right. And they had their accounts published before New Year's Eve last year. Within 2 months, they have their accounts up and published. And here we are with the soccer and RTE, both heavily subvented. And we still haven't seen their accounts.
Now, what does that say to you? What does that, as a finance person, what does that say to you?
Well, I tell you what I think, because I suppose I have followed their accounts for the last few years, and I've written them up, I've commented on them. I have a suspicion the auditors are afraid to sign them off. I think they're waiting for a sum of money or some guarantees before they sign them off, because the job of the auditor, well, I suppose they have a number of roles. An external auditor, one is to check the accounts on behalf of, right? Not the employees or the managers. In a private company, their job is to report to the shareholders. Their contract is renewed every year, and it's done at AGM. They're appointed for another year. Or they swap out after so many years. Well, that didn't happen in the FAI, right? But it did this year now. Sorry, it did. But Deloitte should have moved on long before they did last year. So in this case, obviously, they are reporting, the external auditors report to the Controller General, the taxpayer, the general stakeholder. And so that's one job the external auditor has to do. And part of that is confirming that their inquiries were answered, there was proper books of accounts kept, and all accounting standards were maintained and in their opinion. And then they give what's known as a qualified or an unqualified opinion. And the kind of opinion you want is an unqualified one. There's no problems. But one of the most important things that you have to get right, they have to confirm, is going concern. Is the organization, are the accounts prepared on a going concern basis? And I have a feeling that might be an issue with these organizations, that maybe they can't guarantee their normal operating run, year in, year out.
Well, RT
for the foreseeable future.
They've admitted as much. They had a bailout there recently, 12 million or something.
Well, now Richard Bruton has kind of said 10 million a year over the next 5 years. That's now earlier on this year, I was predicting 100 million. They needed 100 million based on the numbers that I had seen up to 2018. Sorry, is it me is it this that's causing the feedback here? No.
Right.
I think it's the scores of fans outside your window shouting abuse at you, Vanessa.
Really?
Is it the fucking fan?
It might be a fan. It might be your air conditioning there, Derek.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry. But I think RTE really needs to take a very close look at itself, because when D Forbes came on board, they created a strategy. And then around this time last year, when it was just after Gay Byrne died, actually, they then created this whole new strategy. It was like an emergency war room strategy. So the one within a year or two, the one that they had set out on was thrown in the bin. So, and it was the same board pretty much, and the same CEO. So they never had faith in it in the first place. So it doesn't need a good talking to. I think it needs more than a good talking to. My own feeling is that it should be shut down and rebuilt.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Because
no longer fit for purpose.
There's a number of reasons for that, right? I think operationally there is just too much bad news in there, because if I'll use the example of Sean O'Rourke, right? He retired and he was doing all this humming and on. He didn't want to retire, but he had to retire. He was at the age of whatever, you had to retire out of RTE. And they'd already let him lined up for 200 grand a year, or 200 grand.
That's right.
Like that, what sort of operation is that? Like, you don't bring back past people. You bring in new people. You have a succession plan.
They did that with Gay Byrne.
Our little credit union here, if we didn't have a succession plan, the central bank would have us shut down. Do you know what I mean? And it's the same with all the, like, I'm not comparing. I don't want this to be comparing like with like, but I mean, they've known since the day he started there, the day he was going to be leaving. But they had no succession plan. I mean, from an operational level, it's a complete shambles. And even if you take out all the personalities, Claire Byrne again, oh God, there she is getting an injection on the telly. And there's some fella teach her how to put on a warm coat, and the tubs and the whole scene that's around it. None of it makes sense. Even if you're to take all that sort of personality stuff out of it.
No, you're right. It's become
none of it makes sense.
No longer.
And the one thing that makes it totally kind of incompatible with proper business broadcasting is they will pay huge sums of money to the BBC to broadcast EastEnders or whoever produces whatever show, Coronation Street, even though that is available to the Irish viewer on a half a dozen other platforms. That kind of money, when it could be done with like local content, like that, those millions that are spent bringing that in, none of that ever made sense to me. Like, even if sort of the new generated content, the pilots, say, from Irish writers and Irish producers, even if it was crap, it doesn't matter. Because it hasn't cost you any more money than watching EastEnders that you can see on a half a dozen other channels anyway.
That's always been a mystery to me, but it is the kind of an oasis of entitlement out there in Montrose, and they don't really know.
But the other thing about all that, Jimmy, is, right, that entire Montrose setup, the building, the all the different studios, the development of the tech, and it's not a cheap. Building a studio is, I don't imagine is cheap, but all the wiring and the lighting rigs and the studio, and the light, all this, and the editing studios and stuff like that. They got all that for free.
Yeah,
they got it all for free. Like, the taxpayers put that under their arse.
They were famously, about 20 years ago, when the digital revolution happened, it was really interesting because I'm into old gear. I'm into old Valve stuff. I'm a bit of a nerd that way. And they had some really class old gear, Neve it's called. And I found out that they were throwing it into skips because they got a bunch of money, millions, to go to digitize everything. They were going to this recording stuff, Avid stuff, Pro Tools and Avid Online stuff. And they literally were throwing these priceless Valves things. So I went out and actually got one or two of them, a couple of the modules. Literally, a friend of mine was out there and he said they were in the skip. Here, you have them. You buy them on eBay. They're $2,000 a piece. You know what I mean? They literally dumped all that stuff. They're kind of wastrels. They just hemorrhage money. Everything they do is just bad business. They don't invest in the right things. They invest in the wrong. They don't. Their remit is to support Irish art and culture. That's what it is.
Well, I would say news as well, to report the news.
In fairness, the news, okay, now I have a personal opinion on the RTÉ news. I think it's incredibly biased, right? But but they do have a good service, Maria. I mean, it needs overhauling.
The only thing they get right is sport.
So why not just have news, sport, and that's it? Give some money to TV3 or Virgin or whoever the hell, and have them do music and light entertainment and drama and whatever. Because RTÉ are not doing it. They're not doing it very well. I haven't done it for years. Very well.
Well, they're not delivering good value for money. And I think even the notion that even if you stop the money that they give to other broadcasters to sell content that's already available to the Irish viewer, even if they just stop that amount of money. Now, I remember valuing it at 22 million from the 2017, I think, accounts. Don't hold me to that now, viewers. But even if they stop that expenditure, I think you'd see a very different platform. And even if they invested in the player, like Channel 4's player is fantastic. Even if they invested in that, they then sort of have the impetus to create content that they can export. They don't have much content they can export anymore because.
But you're missing some vital. That's like brain power. That's what that needs. Not just money. You need the right people there who are doing the right things. Understand the zeitgeist. There's guys that have been there. Sean O'Rourke, you said, it'd be like spent 44 years out there and they never leave. And he was, again,
he was talented though. You give him that. He was conservative as fuck, but he was incredibly talented. Like, well, you give him that. And Marion, God rest her now, she was talented. Now, she became a bit of an old hack and a bit of an old lovey in the end, but she was talented. They did have the talent.
They go way past their sell by date. They don't get.
Oh yes, indeed.
All the time.
But you were like that here, Jimmy. We're like that. Mary O'Rourke, they still wheel her out all the time. You can't blame RTÉ for that. Do you know what I mean? It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Well, anyway, if you're right, and this that in order to do the license fee is going to go up, that's going to be a big problem because the general feeling, the public, and I'm not speaking for the public, but there's not a good feeling towards RTÉ, and nobody wants to pay the TV license, including me, because I don't watch RTÉ, to be honest with you. I don't.
Well, you could look at their board. Like, their board it's a paid board. I'm not complaining about them being paid, by the way, but and I admit this now. I've applied for a directorship there twice now, three times. I think I've gotten a PFO, right, and then 3 times the people that they've appointed have had no board experience, no finance and accounting experience, no governance experience, no money laundering, ethics, nothing like that. And I'm PCF by the central bank, by the way. Didn't even get a look in.
Well, you talk about probity. You were talking about this last week, and Norma talks about this in politics. It should be in anybody that's getting that much money from the government. They should be held to a very high standard of ethics.
But your Mara Doherty's not stuck for $3,500 a meeting. That's how much she gets paid per meeting.
How much she gets?
She's chair. Yeah, I'm chair here, and I get nothing. I didn't
Here, lads.
Moving away from RT, but sticking with budget and the arts, Jimmy, we saw a very large amount being allocated to the arts in the budget as well, almost unprecedented to use.
Unprecedented, 150 and 50, 130 and 50, right? So 180 million, right?
Yeah. So why aren't artists, people in the arts around the country, why aren't they jumping for joy at this? What's it all about?
Okay, well, you're asking. I know it's a rhetorical question from you, Neil. You know what it's all about, but it's like, if we can explain it to people that, first of all, there's no cohesion. You talked about the Debenham was worker the other day. There's no cohesion among artists. We can't even decide who's an artist and who's not, right? That's a big argument. Who's a musician, who's not, who's a critic? Is it all about young guys writing their own songs, playing 4 chords on the guitar? There's plenty of those guys. Or is it about guys playing at weddings or doing Bon Jovi covers? Well, so we have to either decide that, all musicians are artists, all of them. That's the guys in Temple Bar doing the Fields of Athenry as well. Or else we have to figure out some way of compartmentalizing and deciding who's an artist, who's not just a hack ballad singer or whatever the hell it'd be. I don't know. I don't mean to insult ballad singers there. And so that's when I was interviewed the other day, and they were saying, so how do you feel about this 50 million for working musicians? I said, well, define a working musician. His definition of what he thought I was way too narrow. I said, if I was what you think I am, I definitely couldn't make a living. This is all pre-COVID, obviously. I'm not talking about now, of course, because nobody's working. But I said, well, I know from experience, there's no mechanisms for distributing that money. She talked about de-risking events. She talked about events and musicians. Like MCD could just go in there and grab 20 million of that and say that'll offset, the next Fleetwood Mac tour or whatever the hell that is, which is no help to anybody that's unemployed as a musician here, right? As an example. So my question, he said, what was my reaction to the budget for specifically that? I'll deal with that first. And it was like, okay, Catherine Martin mentioned that there's no mechanism for distribution of that, so I can get some of it. And the bloke that played at weddings and the guy who's in Codaline that they can't tour or whoever. So it's a broad swathe of musicians. How are they going to benefit from that? That's one. The other one is the 130 million to the Arts Council, which will include IMRO and all that stuff. Now, that happens every year. It's not the same amount of money. And I've been doing this. I've been a composer, as Vanessa pointed, Grammy nominated. I hate to drop it, but I've got my bona fides.
But the lads are always dropping Trinity and all the rest of it.
Well,
so
fair enough.
Why not?
So I've got my bona fides, and I have never had a penny out of those people, not one red cent, and kind of reveled in that. It's like, no, I'm outside. I'm James Dean here, and you guys are so I'll just carry it. But now the time has come. No, actually, I'm fucked. It's like I'm on the dole, and there's 180 million out there. How do I get some of that? So, I've already involved in, and many of my friends are involved in creative endeavors anyway, which is our big Achilles heel as artists and musicians. Regardless if there's no money, we will still create and still do stuff. Write stuff, write drama, write poetry, write songs, write music. Performer will do that, but maybe the people that get it are the bureaucrats, the established, the Arts Council, and all those characters.
Yeah,
I've never.
When you were talking, Jimmy, I was trying to think, like, how could you do this? Like, and this is just off the top of my head, and I was sort of thinking, like, is there a qualifications path type of a thing? That probably going back to education, which is actually a nonsense when I think about it, because that's the idea of having like qualifications path is the opposite of creativity and creating something off the hoof and doing your own thing and going outside the box. When you try
Well, that's
to
the
put
problem. It's so well now, but now, of course, some of us have wised up to that, and we've gone back, and I've gone back and done my master's, my postgrad, and all that stuff, right? So there's the pieces of paper that say I'm a bona fide lecturer, for instance, in music, but it doesn't make you an artist. That doesn't make you an artist. So you're correct. But when you're looking at those things, it's so subjective. It is so subjective. So it's not a sport. Yeah, if 100 meters, if you do that in 9 seconds,
exactly.
It's different in music. It can't be.
But
or any sort of art, like pick an artist like Banksy. So if you ask everyone here, some people probably love him, some people probably hate him. So it is such a subjective. That's an art or music, the genre of music you like, what you're into. Like for some people, one genre is nice, and other people they love it. So it's so hard. I don't want to labor this point again, but it comes back to what I've been saying a few times on this show about the universal basic income as a way forward, as a possible solution. And just
keep that thought, because I want you to talk more about that. But Paddy Cullivan, who we should have on the show, you should bring him on something. Paddy's a fantastic thinker, and we were talking about this the other day. He said there's 35,000 musicians registered now as musicians, full-time musicians in Ireland. Now that's guys that play at weddings up to maybe the Edge. I don't know, right? But 35. He says that 50 million. That's 142 euros each. If that's divided out among everybody else, so that can't work clearly. So. Go back to the universal basic. Sorry about that. Go back to that.
But the supports for businesses, small businesses that they've announced in the budget, if we're still calling it a budget, they're using last year's turnover.
Yes.
As the thing. So maybe that's an idea for the artistic community. Last year's income. Or maybe the average of the 3 previous years, because I know like the people would have tours that wouldn't have happened and stuff like that.
Well, yeah,
I don't have the answers.
In any business, that makes sense, except for the music business. It doesn't, because invariably the really talented guys are the ones that you never hear about, that are making the great art that gets watered down and becomes U2 and Codaline or whatever. But somebody created something much better before that. It's a bit like painting and fashion. Before A-Ware gets it, somebody made some crazy shit in Milan and showed it, and that's inspired somebody to have the latest dress.
Yeah, but is there something quite rotten in the arts as well? Because I remember when we did Colgate, John Colgan, and I just let rip, and I know we had a bit of squeaky bum for a while, thinking we were going to get sick. But there was something very fundamentally wrong there, and it went on for a long time. And I'm not just talking 3 or 4 years, or it was over 20 years.
There's a systemic. It's almost like the
that was funded. Every single inch of that was funded by the Arts Council.
Of course, and that particular gentleman, the Abbey. I mean, for years he was swanning around town. I don't know what he was doing, but he was making much more money than any of we were. And we were creating stuff all over the shop. This guy was living the lifestyle of a millionaire, and it was a little creepy as well, wasn't it? I mean, there was that element. So,
but I said we've done it, and there's no point doing it again. But like I'm just wondering, is it just typical of Ireland, really, that it's just them and us in every industry, it
appears to be that,
place.
and there are panjandrums in the Arts Council and involved who know what to do, and they grab the money whenever it's going, and it never comes to me and the guy that plays and the guy fiddle player.
Well, that's in every gig, so that's in accountancy as well.
Can I ask you, Jimmy? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Right.
And maybe rather than jumping into the question, I'll kind of throw an idea out there. At the Arts Council in March, had a grant, a potential grant for
performance. I applied for that. I applied on the reviews, yeah.
And there was, I believe, 900 people applied for it. You got the grant was €3,000.
That's right.
There's 900 people applied for it, and I think there was only 300 spots or 300 grants to be allocated.
That's great.
I'm going to make a massive assumption, but let's assume that the 600 people who didn't get the grant went on the PUP anyway. And when you look how long the PUP has been paid, one suggestion was, well, why didn't we just give everyone the 3,000, whatever the amount was, and put the and put the PUP on hold in the meantime, and give a top up to it as well, because perhaps people might have still liked the idea of getting a grant and working on a project. Now, that was just something that somebody said to me. But trying you to put you on the spot, Jimmy, and I don't mean for you to solve everyone's problems here, but if you were getting that allocation, if you're the minister, or if you're in the Arts Council and you're given free reign to kind of like, what can we do? What can we do to encourage artists, to encourage art? And at the same time recognize that there's only so much we can do in live venues and the theaters. What, any suggestions that you would have?
I haven't worked out the nuts and bolts of it, and that's where I'm interested in what Derek has to say. I am a very strong proponent of this idea that if you're a musician, if you're a drama writer, if you're a person with track and who has achieved certain amount of things, I don't know how you quantify that. It's like, okay, here's the deal. There's 400 quid a week. That's, you can live on that, write music, do whatever the hell you want, do some gigs, sure, do whatever if you get stuff that gives you loads of money, by all means, or if you want to create the next, magnum opus that nobody will ever hear, do that as well. Just be an artist, and there it is, basic income for you. Denmark did it for a while. France do it to a degree, and it works okay. Now, unfortunately, I can't point you to any great French musicians, apart from obviously Stefan Grappelli, people like that, but that's 80 years ago. But it doesn't have a thriving, amazing rock scene or jazz scene or anything in France. But I wonder, the bigger argument is, does that kind of produce good art? I don't know if it does or not, but it's certainly something in this time that should be looked at.
And I guess this is probably a conversation we're going to have a lot more, because in the UK they have that Retrain campaign, which is an awful campaign, and we did talk about it lightly next week. But I'm sure this is something we're going to revisit a lot.
That's a good question, Neil. What would you retrain us if we all had to retrain? Given the disaster story, era that Derek was talking about last week, the artificial intelligence and the robots are going to take over. I'll count it to the first to go. So what would I do?
Well, you see, this is where actors and performers have an advantage, because most of them have had other jobs and second jobs throughout their lives, so they can easily slot into another career if they're forced to. It's the accountants that are going to struggle, fortunately, so we can finally look at wag our fingers at those nasty accountants.
That's fine. I listen. That's cool.
Derek is retraining.
What would I retrain as though?
Derek is retraining as a philanthropist. Maybe that's something you could go down the road of.
I like that. What are the hours?
I'd be good at that.
Is there dental?
I might train as a politician. Oh
God! That. I thought you already were a politician.
Hey,
I was due to start my new job yesterday with Apple. But it's on.
Are you allowed to tell us that, Derek? Are you allowed to tell us that?
I don't know. I've signed lots of papers, but I didn't see a non-disclosure agreement. But it was for Apple Maps. So if you're driving around Ireland and
finally someone will know
in the near future and you end up in a field,
that might be you. Derek. Is that in Cupertino? Where is that? Where's the Apple? Where would you be working?
Well, from here, where I am right now.
Wow.
He's going to be. So when you finally hear Mullingar pronounced Mullingar and not Mullinger.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of, that was what one of the things that came up in the interview was, if you were an American and you were in Ireland and you're looking for directions, what would you do? Well, I said to him, well, you have a problem, because when you ask somebody for directions in Ireland and you begin by saying that what they say is
the graveyard.
I wouldn't start from here.
Yeah, you can't get down from here.
But I said the start date was supposed to be yesterday, but at the moment it's on hold, so I don't even know what that means. So
artificial intelligence, it's replaced you already.
They're after
human voice. They don't need the human voice, Derek. They took your advice.
Either that or they saw you on the show.
They heard about my trade union activity and we're not getting him in here.
You should have told him your brother is a Fine Gaeler. They'd have had you in like that.
That's why he got his haircut. That's why he got it.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
The rot set.
The leaker. Are you the leaker?
You got a tip off that Tim Cook doesn't like people with long hair.
Is that true?
Where I would have been in that new building, the spaceship building.
Yeah.
So that would have been nice to win for a day anyway. But we'll see. We'll see what materializes. But to be honest with you, very young. I would really like to set up a trade union in Apple and go. You can't just like put people on hold when you're supposed to start on Wednesday and then tell them you're on hold and no fucking future plan or whatever. So we'll see.
Speaking of Apple there, because I'm sure if you're starting in Apple, you're up on all things Apple. Apple announced new iPhones this week. Is that anyone can share with us on that?
No, that'd be no.
Just a different department. That's why you're on hold, because you didn't know. Well, the Apple did announce 4 iPhones this week, and it's funny how prior years, every time they did their iPhone announcement, there's a lot of furore, and it kind of was like a fizzle. It was a fizzle.
Oh, it's gotten very damn scurvy on that front. I mean, Samsung have overtaken them. I think I was an Apple fanboy for years and had all the iPhones. And I moved to Samsung just for the phone. My studio is all Apple Mac. It's fantastic because that's the kind of industry standard. But the phones, I moved over to Samsung about 2 years ago. And they're just far better phones. I'm sorry, just better battery life, better everything.
And
all right, is there any more product placement now here?
But it's the furore. It's the cult of personality is gone from Apple. Where since Steve Jobs died.
But you see, this I'm wondering now is all the things that would have been normal hype, big events like the budget, the announcement of a new Apple phone. Are they all just go?
That's what I'm wondering. Is are we so?
Has the revolution actually happened?
We're so burnt out from COVID news that we don't care about that news.
Actually, I did want to say that about the budget, that the budget is such a set piece in Ireland, and there isn't really the equivalent here. I know that there's big negotiations about relief packages going through Congress at the moment, and they're all suggesting different things, but there isn't sort of the everyone sitting with bated breath to see whether the price of the pint is going to go up or whether it just there isn't that set piece event here that there is at home, and it's actually it's quite looking at it seems like I was looking at RTE going through and here's a family of 4 and they will be up whatever it was, 315 euros a year, or £5 a week, €5 a week, or whatever it was. And it seemed like I love the budget as well. I used to always be all over it, but it seemed like strange just to be watching this sort of big set piece event and people looking to see an extra $5 here, an extra $10 there, that type of thing.
I think Neil's kind of off the cuff comment there is actually really profound. I think, and I started off my introduction in this here when I was being introduced to you. I am genuine. I have a bit of COVID depression at the moment. It's like just fuck everything futile. What's the point? I mean, about being a musician, for instance. I mean, you have to practice. I should be practicing 3-4 hours a day. I couldn't be bothered with my hours. It's so because I wonder why. Stuff like that. I'm creating stuff about everything, money, the future of the industry I'm in, seeing other industries, looking at what's happening in the UK, looking at France and like Spain locking down again, and seeing this thing just dragging out over, maybe a decade, and
I tell you,
it's some sort of dystopian landscape where we have to change everything. So when somebody the little exciting things are, well, who cares? With the overarching depression of that, it's kind of, well, nothing matters much, does it really? Look, it's really down to survival now.
There is a great sense. You're absolutely right. The sense of futility almost in the hopelessness of, the reality of this is a cyclical thing. Lockdowns are the future. Vaccines are a mile away. And I think I tweeted earlier. There was an Irish Times headline from. One of comments from Leo today where he talked about you can get COVID from door handles and cutlery and mindless family gatherings. I thought it was a Waterford News headline when I saw that's the level we're at now, and there is a sense of futility, and it does. I know it's a big issue, and perhaps we can talk about it in more detail another week. But the whole mental health aspect, we have a horrendous track record with mental health in Ireland anyway, and it's not like a broken leg or a broken arm where we can acknowledge the pain you're going through. But mental health, it's not enough to just acknowledge the hardship that lockdown restrictions and all the rest brings to mental health. You have to back it up with action. And you're not alone in saying that, Jimmy. There's a lot of talk about it, but there seems to be very little beyond here's some phone numbers to call and talk to a friend, but you can't even talk to a friend now unless it's virtually. And science tells us that interaction virtually and online is nowhere near. So I see relationships suffer. The science has shown us relationships suffer when you don't have physical contact with people. Even if you're the most extroverted person on the planet, relationships will still suffer. And there's nothing really. I mean, there's nothing from the government. There's no big campaign around mental health. It feels like there isn't even any effort to kind of beyond basic acknowledgements. That
Neil, it's really interesting because I have very personal experience with this. I won't go into detail, but looking for actual help before COVID, even in certain areas, mental health it just doesn't exist in Ireland. There are places in the UK and in America for certain things. We have a terribly inept mental health service. There's nothing.
I remember a few years ago, Jimmy, the HSE ran a campaign, a mental health campaign, and their tagline was "Look after yourself." And I was going, that. Think about that. Look after yourself. Like, I know what they meant.
It's a bit like cop yourself on, isn't it?
Like, catch yourself on. It was only when I went to America. Interesting.
Don't come to us. Like, don't come to us.
Interestingly, that's very interesting.
The last people you need to talk to is us.
I've suffered with the issues all the time with anxiety and depression and shit. I'm an ex-addict. I mean, I was alcoholic and drug addict and stuff for years. I'm sober now a long time, but it was only when I went to America that I could find people nearly everywhere, in fairness, in Detroit and places like that, and I could go in and say, listen, I get these things, this is what happens. Oh, really? Okay, well, we got something for you here, we got some medication, or we got this other way. And they would have answers. They could actually treat me. I'd go to a doctor in Dublin and he would literally say, catch yourself on. That'd be 40 good. Thank you very much.
Well, we shouldn't laugh, really. We shouldn't laugh because people are struggling. And
they are.
But Jimmy, as well, I don't want to make light of all this. But I certainly even know from my business that November is always the worst month.
Of course.
It's always the worst month to get
seasonal
calls.
And SAD
and it's a short month and it's dark and all they're doing is looking at sparkly lights and presents on the telly and ads and
sure. And I don't want to bring the tone. I don't want to bring the tone down. And it's like but there is a malaise. There is just another.
I think there's a trigger. There's a trigger in Ireland. The moment.
Yeah, but we also this moment in time, this moment in history, is they say unprecedented. I hate the certain words now. I'm become a real buzzword hater. Don't say circuit breaker to me. Don't say unprecedented. Do you know what I mean? But there's nothing else for it. That we've never come as a species. We've never seen something like this. We don't know what it's like. It's pretty existentially terrifying for everybody, even if you can't identify it. There's a feeling. I get it with all the people I talk to. I get this feeling. Jesus, your tone level. You don't seem like you're in a place. You know what I mean?
We're behaving very differently with the whole thing. I mean, there was we're still living with HIV virus. That hasn't been eliminated.
No.
And now we're living with this, and we haven't come to terms with how we live with this.
That's what you mentioned.
The reaction is to lock down.
Well, you mentioned it earlier on, and there is no strategy. We're not. Maybe it's up to ourselves to do it on a personal level.
It looks like it. It definitely looks like it because there's a huge change now. I meet people. So I actually live right in the city, Jim, as you know, right? So I mean, there's 1,000 people could walk past that door in 24 hours. Okay, and that's probably an exaggeration, but between buses and cars, definitely, at least, right? And I've yet to see someone who's totally shook anymore. It's before, if in March, April, you could see it was like a zombie, people kind of walking, afraid to talk to each other, or that they'd be at the end of the driveways, or they'd be waving out the window. Now nobody cares. And I've seen that now, particularly around here, that they just don't care anymore. They've given in, or they've just got used to it, or they've either decided, I'd rather have it now and get it over with, or I'm not as scared of it, or I've had it. That's
how quickly we adapt, and it's just
and I have a feeling that's actually going to escalate the end of all this. They're just going to just say, lads,
enough already.
The fines, they'll start the fines, and suddenly the protest then will be less about masks and no masks, and it'll be about the fines, the protests objecting to the fines, or if the schools close, or if the hospitals crash completely, you know. I mean, we still don't know the real cost of all the delays of cancer treatment, screenings.
The human, the death rate, it's going to be carnage.
And we're talking about we only know the impact month in, month out here based on our income and mortgage payments and rent and stuff like this. Well, another year of this, there'd be, it's not just month to month, it's catching up, it's just trying to stay ahead of it.
Well, we're coming to the end of the show, and I don't mean to bring us to a downer, but I think 2020 has sunk to a new low with news that I'm just seeing.
What?
The beloved Fungi has gone missing. He hasn't been spotted for a number of days.
Fungi the dolphin. See, he's got the COVID depression, and he's
gone.
But sure, he must be. How old is he?
He's been there for 40 years, I think. How long did dolphin live?
How long does he live? What does he want to be hanging around there for?
I played a 12 football tournament in Dingle when I was under 12. I'm 44 now, and Fungi was a big attraction at that stage.
But he was there when I lived in Cork anyway. And do you know what? Sure, what was he doing hanging around there in the middle of winter for? Why doesn't he go somewhere nice for the winter?
Somewhere nice. Well, the Gulf Stream stopped. There's something wrong with the Gulf Stream. I don't know.
Well, he hasn't been spotted in over 2 days, or for 2 days since the 13th of October. And there's concerns that he's gone.
Now, there's the thing about the Fungi the dolphin. Now, tuna, what is that? Dolphin-friendly tuna. What is that? You've seen that on tins. Can anybody explain that to me?
The tuna and the dolphins are friends.
No, it's
dolphins don't get caught in the nets or something.
What is it like? We eat these tuna. We eat these because they're assholes, right? We don't like tuna. We'll never eat dolphins because they're cute and they're sweet and
right? I don't know.
And so now we even put on the tin that these are dolphin-friendly tuna.
Yeah, but that's like your shampoo, and it says, green tea, passion fruit, and essence of whatever. And
that's your shampoo.
So how do I know? How do I know what the essence of whatever smells like? So that could be anything.
I was in Lidl and I bought some shampoo, and it was Lidl own brand shampoo because you're worthless. That never happened. I made that up.
Well, that's very good. In the last few minutes,
make a song out of that. Yeah, Jimmy, you need. Do you know what to do at this moment in your life? This is where you reach that bottom that drives the artist.
Nadir, is it? No, this is where I find my second wind. Okay, cool.
We need a song. We need a COVID song. Christy Moore throws out songs.
Oh, please, Christy, please stop. Christy, just stop with the throwing out songs when you're not ready.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the Late Show last week, and Kevin Bacon was on in a very lackluster interview, but he mentioned his graw for
Irish
the disco guy.
Kevin has a rock and roll career in Germany. He's a rock star in Germany. He does gigs and stuff.
He's a fan of Irish music, it seems. He's a fan of trad music and Irish music because he thinks it's very edgy. But it was suggested to him that he goes off and studies Christy Moore and then play a couple.
That would sort of out.
That's the end of that now.
But what did John Lydon is supporting Trump? Yeah,
I see that. He made the point, and it's actually now. Hold on a second. There's always a bit now. John Lydon's a little bit problematic, as is Morrissey, right? But he did make a good point in that he's living in Bel Air or somewhere now, posh tastic.
He's a very wealthy man.
Well, I don't know if he is, but he married a very wealthy woman. I know that.
That's it.
So immediately I'm here.
Where did we go?
Yeah. So, but he made the point that when he was growing up, that the people of the left were the ones that were screaming about tearing down the establishment, blah blah. And now he feels that in America that they've stopped doing that. He feels, it's a reasonable point, I think.
Yeah, and then you look at the Republican nominee for the Supreme Court.
No,
Barrett.
Amy Barrett.
Yeah, she's a judge on the Seventh Circuit, and there is real concern amongst the liberal people that.
But I see that, Derek, and they're talking about Roe versus Wade and stuff. And hold on a second now. Why would you jump to there? That's a big jump.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Well,
Now,
based,
so she's
based
a
on-
practicing Catholic. Okay, but
and-
fair
and
enough.
her
I thought we were
speeches
allowed
and-
live and let live. I thought we were allowed. This is the deal now. Biden's
People are reading way too much into
Way too
people's
much.
religion. If religion was actually banned,
it
not
won't
banned
affect
as
me.
in the practice, but even being mentioned in, whatever, whether it's the the White House or Congress or the Dáil Éireann or the Seanad, or if religion was banned from being mentioned, you'd view people very differently.
And I think
sure
it's just a bit of politicking there. I think in that the Democrats are a bit annoyed that it's a Trump,
It won't impact me because I won't need an abortion, and I'm not gay.
But why do we assume that these are going to be issues?
Yeah.
Why, you know what I mean?
They won't touch those historic issues. I promise you, they won't.
Roe versus Wade is one of the big stepping stones of the American. That should never be touched. And I don't think
it won't be.
Crazy
it won't
woman.
be. It's too old as well. It's too old.
She couldn't say that in the confirmation hearing. She was able to say things like Brown versus Board of Education, which desegregated schools. That was super precedent that couldn't be touched. But something like Roe versus Wade, she wouldn't comment on that because that's an ongoing controversial issue. And anything that was ongoing or controversial, even something like climate change, she wouldn't comment on. She wouldn't comment on the gay marriage case.
This was for the confirmation hearings. This is an interview. You'd say whatever gets you over the line.
But the problem now is that 6 out of 3 justices will be of the Conservative side, and 5 of the 6 of them have come through the Federalist organization. They have selected them. They have picked these and suggested them to the presidents that nominated them, and there's big money behind these organizations to try and it's not only a Supreme Court level, it's also at the federal level where they've packed about 300 judges onto the federal court as well. And look, I hope you're right. And
this brings it back. Hang on, Derek.
But let me finish the point. I hope you're right in that what the rights that have been won are banked, and all the rights that we've secured are banked. But generation after generation, won again.
Let me tell you this. Rights don't have to be won. Rights are there because you're entitled to them, right? What you have in America at the moment is everyone's looking at polls, and they're all national polls, they're all national opinions. Everything coming off the TV are national syndicated shows, right? But in actual fact, if you look at the polls on a state by state, they're very different. And you're talking about stacking the court, right? The chair of the Judiciary Committee, right, is Lindsey Graham, and he's in a neck and neck race in South Carolina. South Carolina. Oh no, I'm going to say South. You could have North. It's one of them, right? He's neck and neck now with a guy, and in fact, I'd say it's going to break. His way. The other guy. His name will come to me. Harrison, yeah, and if that changed, that could change anything. Now, that's not the race to watch in my book. There's a different race I think is worth watching. But you see, the choice of expanding the court has been with Congress and the Senate several times. Yeah. Your Supreme Court. And if people's rights are anyone that attempts to take away a right somebody already has, is going to take a much bigger argument than who's sitting on the Supreme Court and who gets the seat.
What happened is
it's far bigger argument than just what goes in front of the Supreme Court. And it's the same here. It's the same here.
What happened is a case will come at a lower court and it'll make its way up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And
at that stage, when it goes from one to the other, is at least 12 years. In the States, it's somewhere in it's really long. No, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in the space of a year. Between A and B, there's an awful lot of talking, an awful lot of movement going on. Because I remember the repeal campaign here. I remember the repeal campaign here in 2018, right? That that was won on the streets at ground level. It wasn't won with the arguments and the debates on the TV. It wasn't won with all the court cases over the years from X, baby X, Y, you know, all this. It was never, if that's not where it was won. It was won on the street here. And that's, and when people have rights, that's where they're won and lost, is on the street and in the ballot box. I think that's posturing. I think it's Democrat Party posturing that they're going to replace Ruth Bader Gingrich's seat with someone who thinks that the power of the Almighty is the only true law, right?
Let me give you an example.
She's not going to make a show of herself like that.
I'm going to give the last word of it to Derek, because it is a bigger topic and we can talk about it in more detail next week when she's sworn in. But Derek, give us the last word on it.
I'm going to give you an example about the voting rights. And states, if they wanted to change their voting rights, they had to reach a certain bar. They had to get approval. The states that were historically racist. The Chief Justice Roberts issued a ruling or a what's it called? What's when he writes the thing down? What's that called? He issued his judgment in the minority to say that that was no longer needed, and so what has happened now? What you see is a big drive to suppress the vote in the states. Just very quickly, a couple of examples. In Texas, one drop-off voting box for a county that has a population of 4.7 million. You're looking at early voting is open in a number of states. In poorer areas, less affluent areas, Black and Hispanic areas, there's queues that are 8, 9, 10, even 12 hours, people queuing to vote. Go to the affluent white area and you're in and out in 5-6 minutes. That's a real infringement on a right that has been achieved, the basic right to vote. And I really hope that you're so correct, Vanessa, that women's rights aren't touched. I really hope that gay people's rights aren't touched. In America, I hope Obamacare is survives. But the first thing on the chopping block, literally the week after the election, is Obamacare, and the Conservatives have the votes on that to strike down Obamacare, and they will do it. And then the other things, the Roe versus Wade and gay marriage, that's coming. It might be incremental. It might be the case where the baker doesn't have to bake a cake for a gay person. That might be the first thing, because they're very like what you're going to see. You said about separating church and state, and I 100% agree with you. Church and state should be separated completely, and that's one of the great things about America, is that church and state is separated. But a lot of these justices want to put religion front and center, and that's from their own writings and from their own pronouncements and their own speeches. And some of the Republican politicians are like very open about that, like the baker's cake with the cakes and all that's sort of like part of the reason why Trump has supporters, because that feels like you're forcing a man to bake a cake about something he doesn't believe in. His religious rights are being... hang
on now, Derek, but that should be a liberal argument as well. Do you know what I mean? That's effectively a liberal argument as well. That business shouldn't have to do this if it doesn't want that type of business. That's this is where the argument, and Russell Brand makes it brilliantly in one of his books, that at one point we're always going to be on the same side. But the race to watch in America at the moment is Kentucky, Mitch and Amy.
You see,
I think that's going to turn it.
Look, it's time to go to bed. I did my best to give Derek the last word, and you still had to get your spoken. We'll leave it there, because we can talk about it in more detail, I think, next week. I think she's been sworn in Tuesday, Wednesday, Derek?
It's a week from today. Well, sorry, a week from today, they're going to have the vote, and then it goes to the Senate the following day.
Oh, okay. So it's the vote that's next week, but she'll pass.
Yeah.
Okay.
The sneaky thing is having it, confirming her before the presidential, whereas when Obama wanted to confirm Garland, was it?
Yeah.
They refused at the same time as well. They refused
No,
because of the presidential election.
But
And now they're squeezing it in.
He was almost a full year. And look, that's politics. That's the name of the game. The winner takes all. But it's setting a dangerous precedent, and it sets it up as in the two factions which Alexander Hamilton warned against. You don't want, like, the Senate used to be this thing where there was bipartisanship. That people would, you could win over a Republican from the South or a Democrat from the North, and like most judges. If you look at most judges that have been appointed to the Supreme Court, it's almost always bipartisan. It's always like 70, 80, 90, 95.
We've that here. You have a guy now, he won't even turn up to meet his boss. He's ringing in sick.
Which, that's shocking.
We won't go down that. We won't go down that road.
Here.
Yeah, we won't go down that road. It's time for maybe hot water bottle.
No, I tell you what will change all that, Derek. And it's the same in Ireland, it's the same in the UK, it's the same across the world. We need to get more and better people to enter politics rather than the hacks.
Here.
And when you have better people running, when you make the gig the job more attractive and more worthwhile for talented people,
how would you do
then that's when you will see that change. And this is one of the reasons why I'm thinking the Kentucky race is probably worth watching. I know Mitch is way ahead, but I think on the day that might be a very different story.
This is why Vanessa's retraining and reskilling as a politician. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you for tuning in tonight, and for our friends.
Before you go, sorry, did you watch Emily in Paris?
Yes, I watched a bit. I had to stop after 3 episodes. I'm sorry, Derek. My wife loved it. She fucking loved it. But no, for me, it was.
Jimmy, I was surprised. I was surprised I liked it. You know, I was. But
I stuck. I took your word. I stuck with it for 3 episodes, and I said, no, I just can't anymore with the cliched French, hilarious consequences.
And myself and Neil are just too glued to Bake Off, so we didn't get a chance.
I was watching that rubbish, The Haunting of Bly Manor. Absolute codswapple shite.
Codswapple.
That's
better than Codswapple.
It's like Granny's Fanny.
Twitter is down, so if you want to bitch about the show on Twitter, you'll have to wait till tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in and joining us tonight. Our voices in the chat pit: Janet, Sean O, Sheila Figs, I can't see all the names, Puka Bend, I don't know, and everyone else who commented. Thanks for commenting. We'll be back next week for lots of exciting things for us to interrupt each other about. In reverse order, Derek's younger brother Trevor, California. Thanks for joining us.
See you, Neil. See you, Vanessa. See you, Jimmy.
Vanessa, the Mistress of Darkness out in Crumlin. Thanks.
Darkness, is it? I know. I'll sort it out. I'll figure it out. It's better than it was the last time I tried the green screen anyway.
And the man who brings a guitar to every party, whether you want him to or not, Jimmy Smith. Thanks.
Mostly Jimmy. Not wanting, but thank you very much. Good night, Derek and Vanessa and Neil. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.